Hi everyone, welcome to Bonnie Carolee Makes Cards. I have 2 Christmas cards to share featuring Spellbinders Sparkling Mandala. These beautiful die cuts are showcased on a background of rays of ink. And that is exactly where we're going to start with this fun background technique, but be warned, your hands will get inky. So let's get started. The backgrounds will be created on Bristol Smooth cardstock. The center of the panel is marked where the halfway point of the length and the width intersect. For the red colorway, the perimeter is marked off at 1/4-inch intervals. For the blue-green background, it will be marked off at 1/2-inch intervals. In the craft room, if I have to spend time measuring something, I tend to reach for my T ruler. I love that this ruler keeps everything square. All you really need for this technique is Post-it note tape and your inks, of course. For the card in the red tones, the ink is going to be applied with blending brushes. But for the other card, I actually used daubers. I also tried out different inks for each card. For this card, I'm working with Distress Oxide inks. For the red card, I'm going to be applying Dye Inks by Simon Says Stamp. The Post-it note runs through the center of the panel out to the perimeter where I have made a mark on the paper. I'm going to start by applying my darkest ink just along the edge of the Post-it note. If you are interested in the ink colors used, they will be listed on my blog. When I'm ready to move on to my next color, I just move the Post-it note over. I keep it at its same center point and then move to the next mark on the perimeter. Because my blending brushes are bigger, it's difficult to get a narrow application of ink near the center of the panel. I wasn't too concerned. I knew that I would be cutting the center of the panel out for the mandala. I'm working with just 2 blending brushes for the 4 inks. Because they're all in the same color family, when I go from one ink pad to the other, I just give the brush a quick rub on the paper towel. I found it quite interesting doing the background with the dye inks and then going on to work with the Distress Oxides. The oxides go on much more smoothly and have better coverage. But I like the end result for both. I think they're quite different. For the oxide inks, the colors are quite distinct, but with the dye inks, it has a bit more of a blended look, although the rays in both are very clear to see. As I said earlier, you definitely will get ink on your hands, and one of the things that you will have to do if you try this technique is change out your Post-it note after several applications. This panel, with its 1/4-inch intervals, did take a bit of time, and so when I moved on to the next panel working with the oxides, I changed it up to 1/2-inch intervals. Although I made the modifications purely as a time saver, I'm glad that I did that because it is nice to have some variation. A combination of the different inks, colorways, and interval patterns makes each background unique. While I'm on points of comparison, I'll mention one more thing. The dye inks dry very quickly. When working with the oxides, the panel did have to be set aside for quite some time before I could go on to the completion of the card. As I get nearer to completion, I do take an extra piece of Post-it note and cover up that last ray. When the ink is applied, it will keep this last ray and the first one distinct from each other. Sparkling Mandala is a 2-piece die set consisting of the outline and the detail die. The panel is cut with the outline die. I position it so it's a little bit closer to the top than the bottom. I also die cut black foam. Next, the mandala is die cut using the detail die and the outline die on silver foil cardstock. Once I have the detail die centered in the outline, I use a little bit of washi tape to hold it in place. For the red card, the mandala will be cut from gold cardstock. Because this has a fair amount of detail, I do run it back and forth several times in my die cutter. I use the craft picking tool to help pop out the die cuts that need a little bit of extra help. Glue is applied to the back of the mandala. A thin layer is applied so that the glue will not seep through the die cuts. It is mounted on the inked die cut and then stacked on the foam. This panel was trimmed down to 3 3/4 inches by 5 1/8 inches. It was layered on black cardstock that had been cut with a stitched rectangle for a narrow reveal. Foam-mounted mandala was then attached. The blue panel and its black cardstock layer were die cut with stitched rectangles for a narrow reveal also. Both cards were mounted on top folding card bases of Neenah Classic Crest 110-pound cardstock that measured 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches, A2 size. The delicate Merry Christmas sentiment was borrowed from Spellbinders Silent Night Make a Scene. For the red card, it was die cut out of matte gold cardstock, for the blue card out of silver foil cardstock, and mounted on black sheet foam. When working with a fine sentiment that I want to foam mount, I leave the foam die cut intact in its background. The die cut is easily aligned on the foam because of the impression. I let the glue dry completely before removing the excess foam. Both cards were embellished with lots of iridescent confetti. I used blue for the blue-green card and red for the red card. As is my norm, I topped the confetti up with domes of Nouveau Crystal Drops Morning Dew. When Morning Dew dries, it is clear, making these iridescent confetti look absolutely spectacular. And that wraps up this pair of Christmas cards featuring Spellbinders' gorgeous sparkling mandala die set on a fun inked background. Although just a little messy, it really is a fun technique and I hope that you'll try it out. As always, I appreciate your visit.